All right. Hello and welcome to the Anime Movie Podcast with your hosts. I'm Kat.
I'm Joe.
Today we are talking about Jujutsu Kaisen 0. The director for this is Sungu Park. I was like doing a side eye at my phone as though that wasn't going to be obvious. And I'm because you totally can't tell. I'm like looking over here. Sungu Park, which as soon as I saw that name, I said to Joe, that sounds like a Korean name.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this is our first Korean anime director. He's from South Korea. Best known for directing the 2020 anime series Jujutsu Kaisen and The God of High School. So I guess he also did the series itself.
The series, yeah.
Which is cool. Jujutsu Kaisen was a weekly serial in Shonen Weekly Jump.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only been out as a manga since like December 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all fairly recent, and was turned into an anime not too long ago. Interestingly, Jujutsu Kaisen is a sequel.
Yes. The anime series is a sequel to this movie, which is the prequel.
Yeah, it usually doesn't work in that direction. Usually you make the movie and then they're like, let's go back and do like a prequel version of it. But the original anime was called, wait for it, Akutami's Tokyo Metropolitan. I don't know how to use my mouth. Akutami's Tokyo Metropolitan Curse Technical School.
Okay.
And then they made the sequel, which was Jujutsu Kaisen. But later, this was all collected into a volume, this original one. And that was called Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Which, I don't know, maybe the sequel became more popular.
Possibly, but I also didn't realize that the manga was so recent. Like, I wonder how quickly they work on manga to anime adaptations, you know?
I think it's getting faster now for manga that's really successful.
Yeah.
Because that sounds really similar to me to Demon Slayer.
Oh, yeah, true.
And also Black Clover. Because Black Clover, the anime went right up to where the manga stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was looking into I was like, when are new episodes going to come out of Black Clover? And I went to see where you could get the manga, like what manga we were up to. Turns out the next manga wasn't coming out for a couple of months, of what continues the story.
It's not out.
Yeah.
But I did see there's a trailer for a Black Clover movie coming next year, so
very excited about that.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
But this series is immensely popular, Jujutsu Kaisen.
Yeah.
I just remember seeing it at Hot Topic. Like every time I would go to Hot Topic, there'd be anime shirts for Demon Slayer was always the most. And then Jujutsu Kaisen, I kept hearing about Jujutsu Kaisen. I kept seeing Jujutsu Kaisen merch all over the place. And I was like, we should really watch that show. And then we just kept not doing it. And then we're like, oh, there's a movie coming out. Oh, let's binge the series before the movie.
We housed the series.
We really did.
With our eyes, with our eyeballs.
We did binge this series for this movie that is a prequel to the series that here's a question I wanted to ask before we do anything, before we get into any kind of non-spoilery stuff. Do you think that this works as a standalone movie? Because one of the things that we said and were very adamant about for the Demon Slayer movie, it does not work as a standalone movie. I feel like this works a little differently. They established the rules pretty well in the movie. It's a couple of different characters. And it's kind of its own, in my opinion, it's its own story. It's its own little universe. And I don't think that you necessarily need to watch the series in order to enjoy this movie.
No, I don't think you need to watch the series to enjoy the movie. However, I do think that watching this explains some things better. Mm-hmm. Or I kind of had a foundation from watching the series. And this had some callbacks. I was like, oh, I forgot that was a thing. And I think it also kind of added to some of that world building.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked the combination of having the foundational information and then this adding to it or kind of cementing it in because we watched it so fast. We watched it so fast.
We crammed it.
We really crammed
that series so hard.
So
much so that I've already forgotten a lot of what happened in the series.
So it was pretty easy to forget certain details. But I also felt like there were some things that I was thinking while watching the movie. If I hadn't seen the series, I'd be very confused about what was going on right now. Mainly just the kid whose name I cannot remember. We should have written everybody's names down.
Toge, the speech guy?
Yeah, Toge. How did you know? That was impressive. Yeah, because Toge has this amazing ability with speech magic. Speech magic.
Cursed speech.
Yeah. And he tries to use words that you can't imbue with any curse magic, which is, recipe for rice balls. So just elements, things that you could put into rice balls. And they took a very long time to explain that. So he'd just be like, Benito flakes.
Yeah.
And but from the series, like, I know, but I was like, man, if he was just saying like salmon roe, Benito flakes, I'd be like, what is this guy's deal? But maybe that would be fun. Maybe you'd be like, I'll find out.
They do explain it in the movie, though, right?
Eventually. Yeah. It just takes a little while.
Yeah. I was wondering if you think that it'd be better to watch this movie first and then go into the series.
I wonder this, too, because, you hate spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
I know this about you. I don't necessarily. Yeah. And that's partly because, there's two different ways of watching something. If you've never seen it before, then there's this level of suspense that is, what's going to happen next. But if you've already seen or know something about an ending, the suspense is, how do we get to there?
Mm-hmm.
So there are some things where it's like, if you know a character is in the main series and they're in the prequel, you feel pretty safe that they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And if there's a character in the prequel that you don't see in the series, you're like, oh, they might be fucked.
Yeah.
I'm just meeting this person. I don't see them later. Like there is, totally free reign for this character to die.
Yeah.
And I
like,
think,
what happened to that character? Where did they go? How come they're not are they going to be in the series later?
Yes, exactly. And so I think that there's that element, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy thinking about that. And you get more of a backstory of some of the characters that you don't know that well in the series, which I really appreciated. I liked getting to know them more.
Yeah. There are characters from the series that are in this movie. And like you said, they do elaborate a little bit more on their story, because in the series, they just kind of show up and they're like, oh, this is that guy, that's that girl, and that's that panda.
Yeah. And you have to get through it kind of quickly, because you're like, the story has to move on. So, and they do that thing where, each character has kind of an episode where you get a little bit more information about them.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels very formulaic. But for here, it felt more natural to get to know some of these characters more. And I appreciated those characters more. I liked those characters more after seeing this movie.
I agree. I'm glad that I got to know them a little bit better, because now if we continue watching Jujutsu Kaisen like season 2, I think that there's a season 2 coming out. Then I'll have more of an appreciation. But then also on the other side, there are some of my favorite characters from the series that only make like really tiny, brief cameo appearances. And I'm like, I wish there was more of that character in this, But you take what you can get. I didn't write it. I just am reviewing it. I'm writing. I'm enjoying it, perhaps.
And when Joe and I found out this was a prequel, we thought that. We saw that the main character was different, so we assumed that just everything was going to be different.
Yeah.
But it's really just the protagonist that's different. Everybody else, mostly, is somebody that we see later.
Yeah, there's, in the series, there's a couple of main characters. There's Yuji Itadori. There's Megami, who is the dark-haired guy, and I won't remember Hammer Girl's name, but I love Hammer Girl.
She's very cool. Voodoo Hammer Girl.
Yeah, I think it's like Nobana or something like that. She's awesome, the voodoo lady. But they aren't in this movie, because we're following first years that appear in the series, but when they're in the series, they're obviously like second years.
Yeah.
So we're following different first years this time around. And we're following Toge, who is the cursed speech jujutsu sorcerer. We're following Maki, who is the cursed weapon specialist, and Panda, who is a cursed spirit or item, like
corpse.
Yes,
like a reanimated corpse.
Yes, and these people all appear in the series, but as like elder students. And then we have our new main character protagonist named Yuta Okotsu, and then of course the man himself, Gojo, is in this movie. Everybody loves Gojo. That's what I see, like car decals. They have pictures of Gojo all the time. I see that, and then like Tanjiro from Demon Slayer.
Gojo's so cool.
Gojo's the man. He's got the most beautiful eyes.
Oh my God. I get lost in those eyes every time he lifts that blindfold.
I feel like this is a lot more Gojo heavy in this movie.
Yeah. Well, I think in the series, Gojo dips in and out a little bit to the point where you're just like, if Gojo was here, this would be solved.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where when you have that kind of ace up the sleeve kind of character who's just horrifically powerful, you have to find ways for them not to be in situations, for there to be some kind of turmoil and for there to be stakes. But we also learn more about what his powers are in this film, which is so cool.
And we also get a little bit more of his backstory and where he came from and how he like came to be, and it's super fun. Like, I enjoyed it. Yeah,
I feel like maybe we should give a little bit of a
spoiler-free synopsis.
Yeah, and like a broad overview of the series itself.
Sure.
Or this world.
Absolutely. Let's try and dance around all of these spoilers here. So the world of Jujutsu Kaisen is, there's all of these. Oh, I'm already out of it. I'm already lost. There's cursed spirits that can haunt people, places, and things. They are usually attracted to like places where there are a bunch of negative emotions. They explain this in the movie about.
Yeah, they're manifested from people, especially strong negative emotions.
And you can imbue these cursed spirits into a weapon or something, which is what Maki is like. That's her specialty. She has a bunch of weapons that are imbued with cursed energy. And through that, they can like cast spells or curses. It's so hard, like going through all the different like verbiage of like the different series, because we've been watching Black Clover a lot, and they have different types of magic, and
that's why I was like speech magic. I was like, no, that's not what it's called in this.
Cursed speech. But everybody has their own unique kind of abilities, and there's bad people that want to use the curses, and then there's like ultimate curses that are trying to take over parts of the town or take down the jujutsu sorcerers. And the main characters are all students at this high school called Jujutsu High School, and they're studying how to appropriately use their cursed energy and their cursed spirits and their cursed weaponry and yada 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 for the good of humanity and to take down these evil spirits.
Yeah, and the cursed spirits tend to be like just monsters. What's interesting is, in Jujutsu Kaisen, in the sequel, they kind of build on this idea that it's not just monsters. You can also have like really advanced ones that can talk and communicate and are more sort of sentient. And but you don't really have that so much in the movie. But there's this really beautiful concept that reminds me of The Orphanage, which it's a Spanish film. It would actually be El Orfanato. Say it quietly, you won't make fun of you.
Orfanato.
And there's this concept, it's a horror film, but there's a concept in it where, there's these terrible events that happen where so many people are in pain that it causes this sort of rift in the time-space continuum. And there's these certain points in time where you get basically like knots, kind of like a muscle would get a knot. And you need something like a medium to exercise, to kind of massage out that knot. And that's how kind of spirits get trapped in a place or to, create hauntings. And this has a similar kind of idea that these massive negative emotions, don't just disappear. Like they go somewhere and they manifest and they can collect. And especially in these places like schools where people get bullied or hospitals where people die, you get a lot of people having these feelings. So you get more of these cursed spirits. And this film has this kind of Demon Slayer vibe, but also kind of Men in Black, because this is more, unlike Demon Slayer, this is in modern times. Mm-hmm. And it's like this Harry Potter idea of like muggles and, magic born, where you find out that you're somebody who can see the cursed spirit, which means that that's the first step to, doing jujutsu is being able to see them.
Yeah. Because
the sort of normies can't see them. And then Gojo is this guy who finds these kids who are able to see them and brings them to, the jujutsu high school. And then they have this kind of secret society where they, try and exorcise these cursed spirits and have these missions. It's very Men in Black. You have these two people who show up and try and take care of something without the normies like seeing it and kind of trying to like keep that undercover.
It's funny that you mentioned the orphanage and Men in Black, because my combination of things was I thought that it was kind of like the Babadook, which when we watched the orphanage, I was like, oh, you'd probably like the Babadook because it's kind of a similar, bad feelings manifest as like a demon or a cursed spirit or something. But from this, I got a lot of like X-Men vibes.
Okay.
A lot of like Charles Xavier and his students versus, Magneto and his students and his posse or whatever. And that's how I felt about it. But you're right. There was a lot of like horror elements in this because, obviously there's cursed spirits and they all take this form of these like hideous monsters and they're attacking people and some of them are too powerful. And it's just a interesting concept, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, there's the main series is paced a little bit oddly.
Yeah, I was wondering when we could bring it up about like, so Kat and I we binged every episode of Jujutsu Kaisen in anticipation for this movie, which now we know we didn't have to do.
Although it gives us some foundation.
It did give context. But I won't speak for you, but I personally wasn't the biggest fan of the series. I thought that it was kind of clunky. The storyline was paced weird. There wasn't a lot of flow, and it kind of ended on this weird note. Like we were just getting into like this really hectic and intense confrontation going on in the series, and then the last couple of episodes like weren't related to that at all, and it left things hanging.
Yeah, they just started playing baseball. You're like, what happened? Why are they playing baseball? There was literally a moment in the movie where I was like, I swear to God, if they're playing baseball right now.
Yeah.
But they didn't turn out to be.
So I just thought that the series, like, and it's super popular. Jujutsu Kaisen fans, I apologize.
There's 60 million copies of the manga sold.
Oof, not gaining any fans on this. Yeah. But I just thought that it wasn't the best anime. Maybe the manga's better. Maybe the manga's better paced and the storytelling is more smooth. But watching the series, it was kind of a struggle for me, and I was just like, I'm not really looking forward to watching this like I was with Demon Slayer or like Black Clover or something.
I watched you check out for sure.
Yeah.
And I went in and out, and sometimes it would kind of drop the ball for me. I felt like sometimes it would have a really good thing going and it'd have this momentum, and then suddenly it would just be like, and we're going to go over here. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Not in a way that built more suspense, but in a way that just, the pacing was strange, but some of the most beautiful fight scenes.
Yeah. That's
super cool powers.
I 100% am with you on that. Like those fight scenes in the show and even in the movie, I think the fight scenes are really great, but fight scenes have a lot more impact. Like really beautiful and awesome fight scenes have a lot more impact when there's like an engaging, awesome story that you're like really invested in, and I just didn't really have that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that it did an amazing job of introducing characters in a way that made them really empathetic and made you want to kind of root for them. At the end, if you'd ask who my favorite character was, I'd say Gojo, just because he's like a badass, and I feel like he's the one you kind of get to know the most. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't really know his past, but you feel like you can empathize, and I don't think there was a lot of strong character building.
Yeah, and like the characters that I like, they only make kind of like cameo appearances. Like I love Hammer Girl. but we don't get like a lot of backstory about her.
She becomes really cool by the end. Yeah, at first she's super irritating, but actually,
yeah, and then she just becomes like this super mega badass. Nobana, I think I'm pretty sure her name is Nobana. I'm just gonna keep calling her Hammer Girl.
We should pause during the spoiler break. It just I
okay,
need a list.
Okay, we'll do it during the spoiler break so we can end. But I also like Nanami, the dude with the weird like cow print blade and the leopard print. Dude, that guy is so awesome. But he's only in the series like he's in a sprinkling. But those are two of my favorite characters in the show, and Hammer Girl, just absolutely not in this movie, and Nanami, he has like a 15-second cameo. It's like, what?
Yeah, it's a little more than a cameo, but not a lot more than a cameo.
Yeah, like I remember, and it's deep in the movie too, and I remember just sitting there deep into this movie, just thinking to myself like, is Nanami not going to be in this? Like, I saw him earlier. Like, he was a part of, like, a crew, but, like, is he not going to do anything? And then just as I was thinking that, like, he happens upon some stuff, and I was like, okay, thank God.
I'm curious about some of those characters because I wonder if they retroactively decided, like, let's have cameos for these characters that we see later in the series. They would be around right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it was like that in the... the manga, and then they wrote them into the series more, into the sequel more.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that too. Yeah, because another one of my favorites, Todo, he has like a 15-second cameo in this as well.
Yeah.
Whereas he plays kind of a major role in the series. So it'd be cool. Like I feel like it's more that they saw the popularity of those characters in the series and felt like they had to write them into the movie to get people that love the series to come in and then be like, oh, there's Todo. Oh, there's Nanami.
It felt like a nod for sure. Each one of those appearances towards the end of the film.
Yeah, because it didn't really add to their characterization or anything. And if you watched the movie before watching the series, you wouldn't look at those characters and be like, oh, I want to know more about that guy. Yeah. You'd be like, who the hell is that? Why is that person in this? And I'm sure, like, if you read the manga, I would bet that they are not in the manga.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd lose that bet, but I don't know.
I'd be there with you.
I'm illiterate.
Although we should probably each bet separately, so then we can split the winnings. Be a better strategy.
We should definitely go into a non-spoiler synopsis of this movie. We got the world of Jujutsu Kaisen.
I mean, and that's half of the non-spoiler of this.
So this story, completely separate from the series. There are characters from it, obviously, from the series that are in this, as we've stated before. But this follows the story of Okotsu Yuta, who has a curse that is bound to him. And we see that it's like this mega powerful, super omnipotent curse that if something attacks Yuta, it just goes berserk and just fucks up everything. Like any kind of shit that's going on, it'll fuck it up. And of course, nefarious jujutsu sorcerers catch wind of this, and they're trying to plot a way to get that curse to work to their nefarious means. And it's basically Yuta's training in the Jujutsu high school and how Gojo saw potential in him and how he was going to like use his curse for the good of humanity, which is what Jujutsu high school does. And then all of the chaos that surrounds Yuta because the nefarious people want to utilize his curse for their nefarious means. How many times can I say nefarious in 2 minutes?
How often do well?
Ne'er.
Ne'er do well.
So I think that kind of wraps it up. Did I miss anything, or you think that there's anything else that I...
No, I think you nailed it. I think that's the exact amount of information you need.
Okay, cool. Like we said before, the action scenes in this are they're really cool. They're really powerful. They're awesome. I think some of the characters are really cool, and it's really nice to get their backstory and their motivations a bit more from the series. Do you think that the animation for the movie is better than the animation in the series?
Oh.
Like, do you think there's more of a budget put into the movie than the series?
I assume that there would be. There were some things where I was like, oh, did Makoto Shinkai do this background? There were a couple that were like a little prettier and sparklier. But I didn't think that it moved better or differently. It feels like there's a decent amount of CGI in both. How did you feel about it?
I thought it was like a slight upgrade from the series. Like if the series is like a 8 out of 10, this is like a 8.3 out of 10. It was no, it was better, but not like crazy better. Like it wasn't
just a little polished.
Yeah, it was nice. And like Jujutsu Kaisen's animation, the series is pretty good. Yeah. And like I can't stop talking about it, but like those fight scenes are amazing for the most part. Yeah. Especially like the big heavy hitter ones.
And some of the the sort of how they render the power, you can kind of like see it. And it looks like, it's kind of glowing smoke or something. And that's drawn really differently and more like matte and flat and like comic booky. And then everything else has this like glow and shine and feels 3D or 4D. And I think that's a really nice mix of styles. Yeah,
it's a good touch. I can't really say much about the soundtrack. I don't really know anything.
Except, let's talk about that first song.
Oh, right. Oh, how could I forget that first song where the guy has like the weird cock rock voice?
That song.
And we watched the subtitled one, so we can't even be like, this is an English dub thing.
That song went all over the place. And I kind of like when a song, takes some turns. But you have this like super high pitched, breathy like lady, and it builds. But the thing is, like, it builds to be so loud. And and this male voice comes in, and it's exactly the way Joe was just singing it. And I was just like, stop.
So did they hire Scott Stapp to do the soundtrack for this movie?
It was really, really strange. And then but everything that's happening is so chill and casual. It's like walking down a path and things are kind of pretty. And, those moments of like somebody looks over their shoulder, like nothing is happening. Yeah. But this music is like building and building and building and gets really intense. And the cutting is still like cut. Yep. Cut. And it was a really bizarre combination. But I know, you just know that somebody was like, this song is so cool. We need to open with it. And then I want to hear the end of this song. And then I want to see Jujutsu Kaisen 0. But it was like, no, this is maybe the end of this feels like a fight scene. And it's not for walking down the blossomed path. Yeah.
That opening song was a little out of place. And then there's this one sound effect that Jujutsu Kaisen is obsessed with. And it happens whenever they imbue something with a cursed energy. And it's this stock, like lighting a flame sound.
Like a flame whoosh of some kind.
And it appears in this movie. And anytime that it shows up now, I just do it immediately after. So it'll be like, and then I'm sitting there like.
Like a parrot.
I just can't help it. Like the sound effects are kind of whack, but
there's with sound effects in shows, you want to have some kind of consistency. You want things to kind of make the same sound, but not the exact same sound all the time.
Exact same sound every time, every single time. But
just pick a couple of different whooshes. Yeah. Whoosh differently sometimes.
Jujutsu Kaisen going to Jujutsu Kaisen, Yeah. How amped are you about talking about Jujutsu Kaisen 0?
Yeah, we watched this last night, and we were walking away from it, and I was like, I'm psyched to talk about this.
We didn't, because we were saving it for the pod.
Yeah, that was difficult, actually.
Yeah, it was. We just kind of drove back in silence.
I know, in the car I kept being like, that's about the movie. I can't say that right now.
I also felt disgusting because I ate way too many of these like nerds gummy things. They're just like little gummy clusters covered in nerds, and I felt awful afterwards.
Do you think you'll never eat them again if you saw them?
No, I will eat them again, but I think I need to eat them in moderation. Yeah. That really kind of fucked my movie-going experience. But so should we get into spoilers then?
Let's spoil the shit out of this.
They wouldn't spoil this, right?
Oh,
You
God,
can't spoil this,
spoilers,
right? Don't spoil
Spoiler
this.
talk, anime movie podcast, spoiler talk.
And we're back. What do you want to spoil first?
I'll spoil this. We just looked up the names during the break, and it's not Nobana. It's Nobara. Sorry. I was so certain. I was one little away from being correct.
So close.
So close. So the curse has attached itself to Yuta is actually like a really tragic backstory type of deal where Yuta's backstory is like he was sick in the hospital and he only had like one friend, it seemed like, and it was this girl named Rika. And so Rika and him like bonded really hard while they're at the hospital.
And she was also in the hospital.
Yeah, she was at the hospital as well because she was also sick. And they bonded really hard and played a lot of games. You know, they're children. They're children.
They bonded so hard.
They bonded
they did.
Fucking hard.
Yeah,
dude.
hard as fuck.
So much so that Rika proposes marriage to Yuta in a very cute way. She has a little ring. She's like, it's an engagement ring. It means that we're going to get married someday. And Yuta's psyched about this. He's like, oh, hell yeah. And then we find out later on that Rika has been, they were walking home or something, or they were playing, or they had a play date or something. And Rika gets hit by a car. And that is such a negative emotion for Yuta that it forces Rika to become a cursed spirit. And that cursed spirit attaches itself to Yuta and follows him around. And it's a lethal protector because Rika was so in love with Yuta and Yuta was so in love with Rika that they're like inseparable. It's like the most intense abusive relationship that's going on in anime.
Yeah, I could see that. And throughout the film, Yuta thinks that he's cursed.
Mm-hmm.
And he learns eventually that it's him who cursed her, which is kind of like, there's a kind of a mystery thing going on, trying to figure out what the history is and how this happened. And that's kind of the conclusion. And I thought, because of the fact that we don't see him or haven't seen him so far in Jujutsu Kaisen, the series, that he was definitely going to die.
Yeah.
Which kind of raised the stakes of everything for me. And I think that's one reason it was nice to see the series, is because everything he was involved in felt dangerous. And it felt like Geto, the villain, was going to succeed in some way. And it started to feel very Rogue One to me.
Yeah.
Whereas there's this new character you've never met before that isn't part of the world but same world building. I didn't say that very well. Isn't part of the series but is part of the world.
Part of your world.
And I thought, like Rogue One, that it was going to make you feel for this person, that you're going to get really connected, and then was going to, in some very big sort of sacrificial moment in the end, kill him off.
Yeah.
That's what I thought was going to happen. And that is not what happens.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
So apparently there is a reference to Yuta in the series.
Oh, yeah?
We just didn't.
We wouldn't have gotten
We wouldn't
it,
have known it because we didn't read the manga.
Okay, let's watch it again
Yeah,
right now.
so here, pause. And we're back again. No, but apparently Toto mentions Yuta as like the only person that he ever fought that he thought was like an equal in terms of power to him. But I guess we just missed it because we didn't know who Yuta was, or we weren't really paying that much attention because we weren't that invested in the series.
Yeah. I mean, I think it might be interesting to chat for a second about some of the similarities and also differences between Itadori, our kind of main character for the series, and Yuta, our main character for this movie. I'd say, first of all, Yuta feels like the main character throughout.
Yes.
And Gojo as a supporting character is heavily supporting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was you who mentioned it first about Itadori kind of falling off of the main hero wagon at some point. I mean, he literally has to like pretend that he's dead. So he literally does kind of leave the main story for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you like who you think is a better protagonist, Yuta or Itadori, but I think that Yuta's story is more interesting and engaging than Itadori. Itadori in the series, his only real motivation is, his grandfather is dying. Oh, spoilers for the series too. His grandfather's dying, and his grandfather basically tells him in his last dying breath, like, hey, don't end up like me. Use whatever kind of powers you can for good, and you don't want to end up like me with it just you here at my deathbed. Like, you want to have friends. You don't want to end up like me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the sentiment is the strong must help the weak, which would be a lot more powerful if you had seen this first or read the manga for, Jujutsu Kaisen 0 first, because Geto's main thing is this very kind of Nazi concept, very social Darwinism.
Very Magneto.
Very Magneto, that the weak should die and the strong should live on. There's no reason for the strong to help the weak. So when the main character of the sequel is literally told, you're strong, therefore it is your obligation to help the weak, then it would, make him a perfect foil to this villain, and that might build up more of his kind of hero status for you.
Yeah, it's the Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility thing.
Yeah. But like Yuta just has a much clearer arc, a character arc.
Yeah.
Where he goes from this like, so withdrawn and like, I can't go anywhere so that I don't want to hurt anyone.
Yeah.
Because I have no control over this.
Yeah,
and
his cursed spirit. He has
so
no control over it.
Beaten down.
Yeah.
And with Itadori, he's already like, why is that kid weirdly strong? Why does he run so fast? Like, he's already got these like little kind of almost tiny superpowers that we haven't had explained very much.
That's what I was going to say. He's super powerful, and like even without cursed spirits and jujutsu training, he's super powerful and fast and superhuman, and there's no explanation as to why.
And
like,
maybe we'll get that later, but
maybe. But like even the characters in this show are like, what the hell did you like?
Yeah,
I
why
remember
does he already have this? Yeah.
One of the scenes, like he punches through a wall. And Nobara is just like, did you just punch through that wall? And he's like, don't worry about that. Like, no, I'm worried about that. How did that happen? But Yuta has a more clear story. You can see why he is the way he is. And
he's very motivated. And you can see why he wants to change. And you can see why he would work really hard. And we watch him progress like that. And I think that's one thing that makes something like Demon Slayer or Black Clover so satisfying, is because you see these characters who are so motivated to do something great, to do something amazing, and to become better. And you believe in their reasons why, and you watch them, not give up over and over. And it's super inspiring. And it has this feeling of like, well, then maybe tomorrow I can go do something great.
Yeah.
And with Itadori, it's like, must be nice to already be really good at shit.
Yeah, he just shows up OP, like, and then he gets magical powers on top of that. Yeah. And it's like, all right, well, how am I supposed to relate to this?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I get it's fun to have like a super mega powerful main character, but I want to see the build up to that, and I want to see like how he got that way, as opposed to just showing up, no explanation for why he's so powerful, why he's superhuman strong. And his motivation is like, my grandfather told me to do good.
His grandfather was an asshole to him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And even the characters in the series are like, that's not enough of a motivation. Like Itadori, like that's such a dumb motivation. That you're only doing this because some guy told you to. And I get the sentiment is like, he was close to his grandfather. That's all his grandfather had was Itadori. So he wanted to do his best to like live out his legacy of like his grandfather's wish for him.
Yeah, honor his memory in some way when he doesn't have any other familial connections. That's a way that he's staying connected to family in some way.
Yeah, but I just don't care about Itadori as much as Yuta. Like, I think Yuta is a far more impactful protagonist.
Totally. And here's the thing. The reason why sequels are frequently not as good as the original is because they don't have an arc that's as strong. You don't have somebody starting from zero and working towards something or getting into this adventure that's so unimaginable for that person, and then they are forced to grow and change to adapt to it. And we love watching that. And then the next one, like the next film, they've already changed.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to throw in a new situation where they have to like change more, but it's not as drastic, or you have to throw in new characters who are going to sort of enjoy the arc. You know, you have, and with long running series like, let's say, Grey's Anatomy, you have the first round of student doctors. And then when they get too good, you have to bring in new doctors who are now, you know, kind of like the focus of the story. But they've made this really odd choice with the sequel. It's a new protagonist, but you know what? Let's just start halfway through the arc. Why?
Yeah, usually with sequels, it's, you know, the first one is like how they become powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second, like at least with good sequels, it's how their thinking becomes powerful, because the villain will like question their morals or their philosophy.
I like that.
Yeah, and I feel like this did a better job of that than the series. Like, because Gato's motivation is very similar, and it's like a time-tested thing of like Magneto, where like we're mutants, we're evolved, we're the next step in evolution. Jujutsu sorcerers are the next step in the evolution of humankind.
Yeah, I mean, and like it's so weird because we've never seen that in history.
But it's like, it makes sense. Like it's that's the typical villain motivation, and you can kind of see the point of it, and you don't agree with it. You see where it's evil and where it needs to be stopped. But you can see how like the villain would be like, no, fuck this. Like, we're wasting our time. We're not appreciated as sorcerers, and these people, they're weak. So let's just leave them behind. We're the next step. Even the villain in this is a lot. Is Gato in the series?
Yeah, he's the head baddie of that group of baddies.
Because it seems like,
at least I think so.
I was gonna say, it seems like in this movie, like he gets killed.
Yeah,
you don't
and now
see it specifically,
and that's the thing.
Yeah,
especially because they're building up this idea that, I mean, I think that Gato is the main baddie in the series, and I feel like I should look it up.
No, I'm pretty sure he's in the series.
And I think that what was so great here is to get to know him more. He felt so evil in this movie, and you do kind of hate him. You're rooting against him.
And he has a good plan, too.
He does have a good plan. Like, he had a good plan.
Yeah, no, he's got a great plan for his evil ways.
Oh, totally. And you learn about, you knew that he went to the school before, and you knew that, Gojo has some kind of a history with him.
Mm-hmm.
But in this, you find out, like, they were best friends. And you can feel that. And you can feel that, like, history that they have. And then later being on opposite ends. And it feels like watching two politicians on separate sides who used to be like best friends in college. You can really feel that that dynamic. Yeah, and that was so cool.
And that's the same with X-Men. Charles Xavier and Magneto.
Perfect.
They were best friends, and then they just had different philosophical routes that they took. And Gato went the evil way, and then Gojo went the righteous way. There's
like a nice kind of respect, but also rivalry that goes into that. That's really nice to watch. And Gato's arm is bleeding, and you have Gojo come up to him, and he's saying a lot of like, well, if I'm dying right now, then I might as well say these things. And so it feels like it's leading up to that, but you don't see it actually happen.
Yeah, and that's like a time-honored thing of like, if you don't see it happen on screen, it didn't happen. And
with Star Wars, you can even see it happen on screen.
True. Yeah, nobody's really ever dead.
Yeah. The Emperor can turn into fucking dust and somehow come back. It's amazing. Anyway, different podcast.
Yeah.
But, and that's another reason why seeing the series first actually kind of makes it cool.
Live action movie podcast, The Lamp.
That's cute. How lamped are you to see?
Should we turn on our lamp?
Oh God!
Sorry, I had to interrupt for that bit.
No, that's good. It's good. Keep that. I'm saying to myself, I'm gonna edit this later. Thank you.
The lamp.
And And that's one reason why seeing the series first, it kind of adds this extra layer because you're like, well, what really happened there?
Mhm.
What did happen? Did he escape? And there's all these like little things to think about, that if you were seeing this movie and hadn't seen the series, you might be like, well, we didn't see it, so maybe he's going to come back. But in all likelihood, you'd assume that he was dead in that situation.
Yeah. That's why I was like, he's in the series, right? Like,
Yeah.
because what happens is he's giving his last words or whatever to Gojo, and it cuts to black, and you just hear like a sword kind of like stab sound effect. And
Some
then
kind of a thud.
Yeah, and then you move on to the next scene of Yuta waking up. So you're left to assume like, oh, is he dead? But Gojo doesn't have a sword. So like, how could he have died? Maybe he did it himself. That like sacrifice thing, like a shame upon my family or whatever. But I'm certain that he shows up in the series. So what was the point of that?
I guess a misdirect.
And
Or
then what
maybe
was that
there's-
sound effect for?
I think we're supposed to think he's dead and that there's some way that he comes back. It'd be really funny if there were just two different characters and we were like, well, I saw an anime guy with long black hair.
It'd also be really funny if he's not in the series and we're so confused about this.
And I have to be like, Joe, we have to re-record that entire podcast.
Look it up right now. Let's look it up.
Yeah. Suguru Geto is an antagonist in both the Jujutsu Kaisen series and its prequel Jujutsu Kaisen
Okay, so
Zero.
he is in it again.
Yeah.
So what is that misdirect? Like, I don't understand where that was supposed to take us.
I wonder. I mean, I think that maybe that's building more on the relationship that he has with Gojo, that Gojo wasn't able to go through with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that says something about Gojo's character and also about their relationship. But and it also builds up the tension, I think, for the sequel for Geto and Gojo.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is kind of like, oh, that's going to be the really big battle, is when like these two guys get together. But this moment where you see Gojo, well, you don't see Gojo kill him, but you kind of imagine Gojo has saved him in some way. That changes what their dynamic is in the sequel. And if you see them fight, you know that like Geto kind of owes him something.
Yeah, because Gojo could have just ended him right there.
Yeah.
But I don't think that he's going to feel like that because
No.
he's a crazy evil person and he thinks that the rest of humanity that aren't Jujutsu sorcerers should be exterminated.
Yeah.
So I don't really have faith in him being all of a sudden getting a conscience and being like, well, I owe a Gojo one for not killing me. Like he already is trying to kill all of his students, or well, I guess in the end he does say like he always had respect for Jujutsu High students and for Gojo, but he's just like these monkeys. Keeps calling people without sorcery powers monkeys, which I thought was a pretty nice like insult, because it's like, oh, you guys aren't even evolved. Like you're the back evolution.
Yeah.
We're the real people now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does seem appropriate for his line of thinking. I feel like we need to talk about Yuta and Rika a little bit more,
Okay.
since they're so
Integral.
integral to this film. I think that with the story between Rika and Yuta, that could be really melodramatic, which can kind of take me out of it sometimes. But I think the way it was done and these sort of flashbacks they did to moments between the two of them, it is timed really well. You just get these little snippets, so it's not enough to kind of be like, I'm showing you this whole melodramatic story. You're cutting back and forth between the past and the present in such a nice juxtaposed way, because you're seeing this like cute little girl and this like beautiful friendship, and then you see like Rika's terrifying.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of Alien.
Like the Sigourney Weaver movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, the look of it, yeah, it looks like a white, what are they called? Xenomorph. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely had that look.
But I also really like what you were talking about with the little snippets of going back at the memories. Because we only get little snippets of what was going on, that also increased the mystery of like
Totally.
what actually happened, because with those little snippets, we're only seeing part of the story, and we're also only seeing kind of the part of the story that Yuta would like us to see, because he's the one telling the story, or he's the one that the story is happening to, and he's the one that's like allowing us to see these memories. But then when we finally get to the full story of what exactly what happened, that was like a really well done thing that they did, because the whole time Yuta's thinking that he is cursed by this evil spirit, and it's Rika, and she is like following him around, and he can't get close to anybody because the cursed spirit of Rika will attack them. But it turns out that he is actually the one that cursed her, because he could not accept her death, and it still haunted him, and he needed to, it was like kind of a beautiful thing of like, he needed to let go of that in order to set her free. But he wasn't ready, and he wasn't ready to deal with that trauma of seeing his love have her. I mean, they said in the movie her head was caved in, and that would
she
be,
was unrecognizable.
Yeah, that would be traumatic for anybody,
anyone at any age, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think, you know, you learn a lot about a movie with how it might show something like that.
Yes.
Because it doesn't totally lean into the gore, but it also doesn't step away from it. There's a lot that's implied, which I think makes it far scarier.
Yeah.
But, you know, you don't have that like disgust feeling if you actually kind of saw it. So things are hidden, but, you know, you just have those little body horrors of like a limb kind of going in a direction it shouldn't, and seeing blood, and, you know, seeing this, you know, that it's her, and it's this small body, and him, Yuta, just standing there, you know, shaking, eyes wide, like unable to do anything. And, you know, it's so visceral. You can just like feel that moment, that disbelief, that just shock that's starting to set in, and the grief that's about to start. And, I think that, you know, Rika as a character, as the xenomorph, is really motivated. It totally makes sense. And I think, you know, there's a moment towards the end where he's telling her that he loves her. And they have this like intimate moment, and it looks like he might even like kind of kiss her nose. Is that where the nose is? I don't know. But it's really sweet. And I think, you know, normally if you see somebody, you know, about to mac on a monster, you'd be like, ugh. I mean, like, cute, but also, ugh. But this I was just like, this is just really sweet.
Yeah, well, because you know it's not actually Rika, and that's just what she's become because of the negative emotions that were associated with her death for Yuta. And I just think that like the story of those two was so compelling and very well done. And how it had like a twist at the end too, of like who was actually cursed. Like, it was very well done, and I think that's one of the best aspects of this movie, is that story. And it's, you know, I mean, it's the main character, so it's a very important part of the movie.
And I think the series needed that.
Yes,
to make it a little bit more compelling, because it's got so much, you know, and the way it, the world building and this idea of cursed energy, and we've already kind of talked about, you know, why I like it, but, you know, it makes sense. Like, I love lore or fantasy that's, you know, used to explain something. And, you know, just these little details of like hospitals and schools. These are the places where this happens the most, in like highest concentration. You know, there's just so much thought that goes into it that makes it feel lived in, and like, you know, it could exist. And I think that is really strong in this series. But the other elements you need to make a really compelling series is to have characters that you really care about. And then, you know, having the fight scenes be cool is also great. And then, you know, things have to happen to make plot. But all of those kind of have to be good to make something that's stellar.
Yeah.
And I think this, through the series, already had a foundation of being a cool world. And then adding a really compelling story that had some mystery to it, and a character that has a full character arc. Like, this raised the bar.
Yeah, it definitely has a more compelling protagonist than the series, like bar none, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. I I think the last thing I want to say is that the so part of Geto's plan. I feel like you should say Geto's plan because of how much you like his plan or think it's very good.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Geto's plan is, so Rika is this immensely powerful cursed spirit that is haunting Yuta or is attached to Yuta. And when she is fully released from, or when he calls upon her fully, she is this omnipotent, earth-wrecking motherfucker. And that's also pretty badass.
And you find out that her powers can kind of switch.
Mm-hmm.
Like she can do all kinds of different things for a moment, which is thrown on to you kind of quickly. But
yeah, and I think that like she's recognized as one of the most powerful cursed spirits in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that catches the eye of Geto, and he's like, all right, that's interesting. So Geto is like a cursed spirit, cursed energy collector, and he apparently has over 4,000 cursed energy souls or whatever that he's collected, and he's this mega powerful dude. And he's like, I want to capture Rika because she's super powerful, and I want to use her to exterminate the human race and just leave the sorcerers because, as we said before, his plan is to get rid of humanity because they're not evolved. And Jujutsu sorcerers are the next step in human evolution. So the way that he does this is he just randomly shows up to Jujutsu High School and he's like, hey, guess what? We're at war.
That was pretty cool. Yeah. Like some B-boys.
Yeah.
Shows up and he's like, we're about to have a break dance battle.
Yeah. He brings his posse with him and he's like, guess what, Gojo? We're at war. You versus me, your crew versus my crew. We're going to meet in Tokyo. We're going to meet in Kyoto. We're going to meet in some other city. And we're going to duke it out in the
It's
city
like, here's
streets.
the date. Here's the time for war.
Meet me at the flagpole, 3:00.
Yeah.
And then Gojo's like, all right, man, that's cool. Let's do it. And so they have this all-out war in the city, but Geto's plan is not to have an actual all-out war in the city. Like, that's just a distraction. His real plan is to pull all of the Jujutsu sorcerers away from Yuta because he assumes that Gojo wouldn't bring Yuta out to the battlefield because as soon as anyone attacks Yuta, that's when Rika comes out.
And they
she
think
starts wrecking shit.
And they think that Rika might not be stoppable.
Yes.
Might not be possible to control or to kind of get back into Yuta.
Or Yuta doesn't have the skills to do it yet. Like, he's
Sure.
just started at Jujutsu High School. So he's like slowly learning. Like, he's only a couple months into this at this point. So the plan works like a fucking charm. Geto gets all of those sorcerers except for Yuta to stay or to come to the city for his all-out war. Then Gojo is sitting on the front lines and he's like, something's up here. This isn't right. Because Geto usually has this like flair for the dramatic and he's not on the front lines, and that would be totally his idea to do. Like, he was like, I don't think this is right. And then we cut back to Geto is now going to Jujutsu High School to attack and steal Rika from Yuta. But what he doesn't...
Can I pause you for a moment?
Sure.
Is that in Kyoto and Tokyo is basically a giant parade of cursed spirits, and it reminded me of Pompoko.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a very evil version of Pompoko because you have all of these crazy spirits who are parading through these cities. But, part of Geto's ability is that he can tell these cursed spirits what to do once he's captured them. So essentially, he tells them to massacre, and so they're killing everyone and anything that they can. So it's much more frightening than Pompoko. But anyway, that's just the detail I wanted to add.
Yeah. So while all the sorcerers are pulled away from the high school and Yuta is quote unquote left alone, Geto's going to go there and attack him and call out Rika and try to capture her. But what he doesn't anticipate is that Mika, her name is Mika, right? Maki. Fuck.
You're so close with these.
I thought I was doing so well earlier. Maki is left there with Yuta, and she's the cursed weapon wielder. And so when Geita shows up, she's like, oh, I kind of figured out his plan. We need to protect Yuta, so I'm going to fight him. Geita just beats the shit out of her. Then once Gojo figures out Geita's plan, he's like, oh shit, we got to do some other shit. I got to send some sorcerers back to the high school. And then he has some kind of like, pardon the Black Clover nomenclature again, he has some kind of spatial magic that he sends Panda and Toge back to the school to protect Yuta as well. And they also get their asses handed to them.
Yeah, and you know that they're first years in this. And there is a good point that Geito brings up later. He's like, you're kind of cruel to Gojo because he's like, you know, because you sent first years back. Like, you knew that they're going to become gravely injured.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, but I knew you weren't going to kill them.
Yeah. Because Geito does have like respect for the Jujutsu High School students.
Yeah, because they're not monkeys.
Yeah. So then they get their asses handed to him, and then he finally gets to his confrontation with Yuta. And, you know, Geita's poking the bear. He's poking the bear a lot. He's calling out all kinds of... He even says in the movie quantity over quality for now. So he's just throwing all kinds of cursed spirits at Yuta and Rika. And Yuta's starting to use his, like, imbuing his katana with Rika's cursed energy. And he's, like, letting the slow drip of Rika come out until there is, like, a final confrontation where it's like, I don't have any other card left in my arsenal. I have to pull out Rika. And in order to do that, he agrees with Rika to sacrifice himself in order to have her power lent to him, and so he can just defeat this guy who's trying to destroy all of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, and it is this kind of Rogue One moment there. I thought it was going to lead into a Rogue One moment where it's like, you know, we are the answer, and I don't care if I don't live beyond this moment. I need to stop this from happening.
Yeah, I will sacrifice myself for the good of the world.
Yes.
So he does do that, and she goes full berserker mode, and they eventually do stop Geita. Like, he eventually does get his ass handed to him by Rika. And at that time, that's when, you know, he's kind of subdued, and Gojo comes back from the battle in Kyoto and in Tokyo or wherever it was, and he has a nice little heart-to-heart with his former best buddy, and then they have like kind of like their philosophy debate going on about, you know, the monkeys versus we need to protect the monkeys. And it's a really, like, that scene is like really beautiful. I love those, you know, the enemy is defeated, but let's have like a discussion of like what went wrong. And they're still stuck in their ways. They're still like, I still think that you're wrong. And the guy's like, I still think that you're wrong.
But it's not mustache twirling.
Yeah.
You know, it's not lame. It's just, it is a really nice moment where the tension is kind of fizzled because this person doesn't feel dangerous anymore. And so you're having this open conversation about it, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think one of the best versions of that is in Kill Bill Volume 2 after the bride, Beatrix Kiddo, she does the 5-finger heart exploding technique, and then Bill's just sitting there and he's like, well, I know I have 5 steps, so let's just have a chat.
Yeah.
And he has a chat about like why he did the things he did, and she has a chat about why she did the things she did, and then he's like, all right, well, guess it's time for me to die, and then he just walks off and dies.
Yeah.
Like, it was, I love scenes like that, and this had a pretty good scene like that. And then they had that blackout with the sword thing that's a total misdirect and throw you off, because we know that Geito's in the series now. Now we do. So I didn't understand that kind of defangs that scene.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, we have Yuta and Rika having their final moment. He pulls out healing magic as well, and then he's able to do like speech magic. Suddenly it's like, wow, she's super powerful, but she also has like a plethora of like abilities that she can pull out. And which kind of reminded me of like watching the Mandalorian and being like, the Force does what now?
Yeah.
You just have to accept what the Force does. If they tell you it does it, you're like, okay, it does that. And it felt a little bit like that. But so the friends that he was protecting, Maki and Panda and etc. We have they're like, we feel great, actually. You're in way worse shape than we are.
You're the one that's real fucked up now, dude.
And then they kind of realize what he's done is to say that he's sacrificing himself. And so he's having this moment where it's like, well, guys, I guess this is it. And they're like, no, you can't die. And there's this, somehow they kind of figure out the mystery behind Rika. And she turns back into, the little girl for a moment. And she says that she forgives him for not coming with her and says, don't come over too soon, and turns into beautiful gold dust. And it's a really beautiful moment.
Yeah. And then Yuta's just left as a normal person. He was always afraid that he was never going to be a normal person again because he had this cursed spirit surrounding him. And he thought he was always going to be alone. But then he makes friends at Jujutsu High. He gets to live a normal life again because he is now finally, I guess, accepted his responsibility for what happened with Rika and how he had turned her into a cursed spirit. And I had missed that part because I had been holding in a pee for the entire movie. And I saw what was going on. I was like, this has kind of got to be the end. So there can't be much left. So I'm going to dip out and pee. But I missed the turning into the gold dust part of this movie. So I'll have to take Kat at her word.
Yeah, I could just be totally making that up. Yeah, and one thing they discover about the family history of Yuta is that he comes from this very powerful line of Jujutsu sorcerers, and it means that he and Gojo are very distantly related to each other. And there's a lot of that in this series of these bloodlines. And finding out Toge is part of this bloodline of the Inumaki, and they all have this incredible,
cursed
speech ability. And that Maki's from this line of Jujutsu sorcerers, but she's this black sheep because she's actually unable to, to see the cursed spirits. She has to use glasses. She has to use items, but she's an expert in them. Kind of like Asta in Black Clover without his magic. And so you get this idea so he's from this family, so he's probably going to continue to be a powerful Jujutsu sorcerer. The reason why Rika as this entity was so powerful, it was because of his level of power. It's not just that she was making him powerful. And with Itadori, you have this mystery behind his family line because he's an orphan and he's being raised by his grandfather who dies in episode 1 of the series. But I think that he, based on his superhuman abilities, he's probably also from some bloodline.
Yeah, he's got to have some kind of connection. You just can't have, unless he did the One Punch Man workout routine where it's
100 push-ups. Yeah.
There has to be an explanation for that eventually, and I'm sure it'll come in season 2. But yeah, one thing that I want to bring up is if you're like me, you love a good plan. And I love, as I stated before, I love Geita's plan to utilize the cursed spirit of Rika in order to destroy humanity and, use her for his evil ways. And I think that is something that's really missing from the series as well. One of my favorite parts about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I love their clever fight scenes, and I love how they have to really think about different ways in which to use their powers in order to defeat their enemies.
Yeah.
I love a good plan. That's something that I loved about this movie, is because there was a good plan in it, and they did have to figure out different ways in order to defeat the enemies, because it wasn't just in the series. It feels like it's just, I'm strong and I'm going to keep getting stronger, and then I'm super strong now and I defeated you.
Yeah.
You have to be clever. That's when I really appreciate a good fight scene. And I felt like this was clever. Geita's plan was very clever. It had some deception. It had some duping. It had some people, while it's happening, being like, wait, something's not right. That's what made that fight scene compelling. That's what made this movie so much more compelling than the series to me.
Yeah, I mean, and you have this scene early on. We learn so much more about Toge, which I thought was really nice.
Yeah.
And he's called in because you get this better explanation of kind of the levels that they assign to, how strong a cursed spirit is or how strong a jujutsu sorcerer is. And they basically say that because he's got this kind of arcane ability, that he's already able to go and do these smaller missions on his own, even though he's a first year. And it turns out that, Geto had already kind of gotten there ahead of time and made it a lot harder. So brought in this spirit who was, I think they said like a class 1.
Yeah.
And that battle was really interesting. And there did have to be some strategizing, and they had to be clever about it. It's because it's 2 first years against this really strong cursed spirit. And I don't like this, sort of, he's a protagonist, so he's just going to be randomly strong without working all that hard. And he's by, some kind of luck is going to beat these like mini bosses with no problem. And it's nice that they had to figure some things out and throw the cough medicine, across the room. And
yeah, because the thing with Toge, it seems like he only can use his ability for cursed speech like once, and then he has to recharge for a good amount of time or take his throat medicine because his cursed speech is so taxing on his vocal cords or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is very unique. So then they go into this situation in like the middle of the movie where they're investigating a cursed spirit sighting or whatever. And it's said to be a bunch of low level things. So it should be easy to take care of. And so they take care of one. And then, the way that they know that the mission's over is like if a veil lifts, they put a cursed veil over things so normal humans can't see what's going on and they're not affected. So when they go into the battlefield, Toge and Yuta go in and they're like, oh man, this is kind of scary. Like, this is my first mission alone. And Toge's just like, don't worry about it. I was also trying to like decipher what each of them meant, and there's no deciphering it at all.
No, it's kind of by context, and it's cool to kind of watch Yuta start to get it.
Yeah.
Because at first he's like, what? And then in situations he's like, oh, you mean good job right now, you know?
So they go in, and then a horde of low-level cursed spirits show up, and then Toge's he pulls down his scarf, and he just goes, explode, and then all of them explode, and then it's like, okay, we did that. Let's get out of here. And then they find out that the veil isn't lifting, and so they're like, why isn't this lifting? We beat the guys. Like, well, what's going on?
It's a good moment.
And then they turn around, and it's this humongous troll, ugly ass level 1 or whatever. And how powerful.
He's in a lotus position, so he's got the crossed shins.
Yeah.
The cross-legged position.
And then Toge and Yuta are like, we're out of our element. This is not what it was supposed to be. And then so you have to see them strategize and like hide and figure out how to distract this thing and how to work together and do the teamwork of how to defeat this thing. And I was like, yes, this is what we need more of. And I will admit, in the series, I think the last episode when Itadori and Hammer Girl are fighting like this super mega powerful dude, there is a lot more of that.
Yeah. She always has good plans.
She's got great plans.
She's the one who has the great plans.
She kicks ass, dude.
Totally. I just wanted to say for a second that like Toge's power, because it's so powerful, you do have to put a cap on that. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
Again, it's not interesting anymore. It's like, when I was playing Magic the Gathering, if there was any card that was too powerful, instead of having a limit of 4 in your deck, you could be limited to only having 1 in your deck.
Yeah.
And it's just because if it comes up that often, then it's just not even fun anymore. So you have to keep this balance that creates more tension and it's more interesting.
Well, I mean, also, I keep making allusions to and comparisons to X-Men. Like in X-Men, they always have to find a way to make Professor X unavailable because he's just so powerful that he could solve any problem.
Yeah.
So at least on the podcast that I love called The Weekly Planet, when they talk about comic book movies, they always call it, he's been Professor X'd.
Oh, nice.
He's just like taken out of commission randomly.
Yeah.
So Toge gets Professor X'd a lot because he can only use his ability every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's also, even in the Pokemon games, there's attacks that are one-hit kills automatically. I think one's called Fissure, but it only works 30% of the time.
Right.
So it's just this huge gamble.
Yep.
And I felt the same way with like Toge's cursed speech, because that's such a powerful thing. And also he doesn't really use it. Like he should just say explode all the time. Like he says like all kinds of different things. It's like you should just keep saying die like to everything, because that's what Yuta does in the end. He just gets a cursed speech megaphone. He goes die, and then everything dies. Like, dude, say die. Don't.
Although it's much more interesting to watch slightly different ways of dying.
Well, yeah, for sure. But I mean, I think one point he just says something like fall down, what did he say to Geita? He said something like
I know what you mean, and I can't remember what word was used.
Yeah, but it was just like, I'm gonna hammer
like
you
it was
down.
like plummet or
yes,
something.
it was plummet. You're right. Good memory. There we go. But yeah, seeing the strategizing between Yuta and Toge that's what I like. And there's not enough of that in the series, and that's what took this movie to the next level for me.
Yeah, and part of the need to strategize is that Yuta hadn't trained enough yet. Yuta's partway through his sort of like physical arc and his ability arc. And they didn't need to have him, randomly step up his ability beyond what he'd trained. Instead, it was that they had to use their brains. And you get, also this camaraderie that feels really nice, this relationship building that you don't see as much, I think, in the series as often.
Yeah. Or it's just different in the series. Like
yeah.
Megumi and Itadori and Nobara, they kind of have a relationship, but it's not as good.
It's a little distant, and it's kind of competitive and a little distant. And they're kind of starting to work together a little bit towards the end in ways that are really cool, but you don't totally see a relationship there. They don't feel like a team completely.
Yeah. I'm not convinced of their brotherhood yet.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll like grow a bit more in season 2 or as the show continues, but as of right now where it stands in the series, I'm not convinced of it, and they did such a better job of it in this movie, which is an hour and 45 minutes, and like I could see the camaraderie, I could see the teamwork, I could see
it can be done.
Well, it seemed also like Yuta cared about the other people too. He cared to learn about them, because there's a scene where Yuta's talking with Maki and he's hearing her backstory, and he's like, well, you know what? Fuck your family. Let's go beat them up. I'm with you. I support you. You're my friend.
Sweet.
And like his whole motivation at the end where he's fighting Geita is like, you're not going to hurt my friends. Like, I don't care. I just got into Jujutsu High School. I don't know who's right. I don't know if you're right. I don't know if Gojo's right.
Yeah.
But these people were nice to me, and they're my friends, so I'm sticking up for them.
Yeah, it's such a nice moment. And it's so motivated because you know that it was kind of incapable. He was incapable of getting close to people because he was afraid of what Rika would do to them. So, he has this person who's latched onto him and no connections to anyone else, but it's such a toxic, abusive, connection that he has. Of course, when he actually makes true connections and real friends, he's going to be like, I'm going to protect these people at all costs.
Exactly. And I think that really worked well for the movie.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we move into amp numbers?
Yes, I do want to ask one more question of you.
Okay.
So I know when we did our review of Demon Slayer Mugen Train, I brought up like it felt like it was 6 episodes of Demon Slayer like chopped up into or like you could chop it up into 6 different episodes. And I think it's eventually what they did.
Yeah, absolutely what they did, yeah.
Do you think that could apply for this as well?
I don't think it was as obvious. I'm sure this was obviously serialized. Mm-hmm. This was a manga series, and it was, conjoined to be this film. So there had to be places where these little mini stories, stopped and started. Yeah. But I think that, when you were watching Mugen Train, you were just like, that's where the end credits would start.
Yeah.
And then you were like, that's the beginning of the next episode. And I don't think it was as cut and dry as that. I think it flowed really nicely.
Yeah. I think it did flow really nicely. And it wasn't as obvious to the point where I'm like, and credits roll and opening song. Like, I could definitely see where they could do it if they are to do that if they want to go the Mugen Train route and be like, here, we broke it up into 6 episodes that you can watch on Funimation whenever you're ready. But it wasn't as obvious as Mugen Train. But I think that they are going to do it eventually. They are going to break it up and be like, here, if you didn't see it in theaters, like have a little taste of it.
Yeah, probably.
Apparently, so this is one of the perils of having to pee, because I had to pee really bad and then I missed the end. And then as soon as the movie ended, you had to pee really bad.
Yeah, we almost high-fived.
Yeah, we like ran out. There was a post-credit scene, apparently.
No.
Yeah, and I don't know
There's
what
no way I
it's
could
about.
stay. My bladder was going to explode.
Yeah, there was no way I was going to stay. And I just wouldn't have assumed that there was a post-credit scene, but as of right now, I don't know what the post-credit scene is. I just, right before we started recording the podcast, I was like Googling it, and I saw like, oh, what does the post-credit scene mean for season 2? And I was like, shit.
Yeah, of course it would have a post-credit scene. Oh, man. I guess we got to go.
Yeah, I was going to say, we got to look it up again.
Oh, man.
But yeah, that's the last thing that I wanted to say before we get into our AMP numbers. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I have nothing to add.
All right, you go first then. You crank it.
Okay. I'm going to give Jujutsu Kaisen 0 an 8.5.
Okay.
And I think this movie is an improvement on the series. Like I said, I thought it had a strong main character. I think that the character arc was interesting. I thought everything was motivated. There were good plans. Ignore the shaking of a collar that you can hear from a dog. There were good plans. There were good motivations. There were setups. There were payoffs. There were some good cameos. There were little parts of the movie that I felt dragged just a little bit.
Okay.
For me, I remember just a couple of points I became very aware that I was sitting in a seat and that my mouth was starting to hurt from eating too much candy. And then it kind of picked up again. I think on the whole, I love the story. I love this story with this world.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big improvement for me. But to get into like the 9 or 10s, it would have had to just like hold me the whole time, and just like I would have had to have come out of the movie just like pumped, just like I loved that.
Yeah.
But instead I was like, that was so much better than I expected.
Came out of the movie, I gotta pee.
Yeah, exactly. How about you?
I'm ranking it to a 9.5 out of 11.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the movie, and as you could probably tell from my rants the entire episode, I love this movie, especially in comparison to the series.
Yeah.
Like, I remember watching the series and just being so disappointed by it, just being like, this is the show that's really popular. This is the number, I looked it up, it's the number 2 anime on Crunchyroll, second to only Black Clover, apparently. But that doesn't account for Netflix.
For like number of streaming.
Yeah. But I thought that this movie did what Jujutsu Kaisen should be. Like, this is what it should be. And like, the series isn't that. Like, it took the world of the series and improved upon it. But because this actually came out first, the series actually is like such a unimprovement of like
unimprovement.
Like, they should have just made this into a series or this into a movie alone.
Yeah, I mean, I like this as a movie. I'm glad it was a movie, because I think that if it was a series, you'd have to add a little bit more padding. So there'd be even more where I'd be like, ooh, this is dragging,
Okay, that's fair. But what keeps me from giving it like a 10 or 11 is because the characters that I was attached to from the series, when they had those like 10-second cameos, I was like, oh man, well, now I'm reminded of the people that I really love in the series.
I just remembered the character that we never learned anything about, who has hearts instead of nipples.
Right.
And I just turned
fucking awesome.
I was like, Joe hates it when I talk during movies, and I understand, but I like to hear my own voice, apparently. And so I really wanted to be like, Joe, he's like a JoJo character. And I was just
he really was like a
don't
JoJo.
bother Joe. He's watching the movie, but I just want to be like, he's like a JoJo character.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He was like a JoJo.
You never see him do anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever.
Like, all of those cronies like kind of sucked. Like the guy with the rope, Miguel or whatever, he sucked. But the nipples guy's like, you can't just show me that guy and like not show me
not
him
show
in
you what he
battle.
does.
Like that guy's got to show up in
He
the
better
series.
come back in season 2.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's like not even in the series either. Like that guy looked hilarious and awesome. He was like a JoJo villain or like a Putty Prisoner from One Punch Man. Like I was dying to see what that guy was gonna do, but
I need to go Google what's up with him.
yeah. So the 1.5 knockdown is because not enough Megami, fucking leopard print tie guy. Not enough that guy. Nanami. Not enough him. Not enough Todo. Like you gave me enough to be like, oh yeah, I love these guys, and then they were gone. And I was like, oh fuck, all right. We get to see the full scope, kind of, not the full scope, but we get to see more advanced techniques that Gojo pulls out in the series, and they're so incredible looking and so cool. Yeah. And there's not a lot of that from him in the movie. So because of that, like I can't give it like a 10 or 11, but sure. I did really enjoy it. I did think it was a much better use of this world. And I hope that Jujutsu Kaisen season 2 is a lot better than season 1, because now that I see what can be done with it, I'm like, well, yeah, please do more of that.
Yeah. That
was great. So yeah, that wraps up our episode on Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Anything else that you want to bring up about the movie before we do the old plugs and everything?
Yeah, just that, it's so nice to learn so much about some of these characters that had to be done so hastily in the series. But it makes sense. If the series is based off of a sequel, then you're not going to spend as much time learning about these characters. And this movie does the justice that all of these characters should have.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Well, thank you for listening to our episode on Jujutsu Kaisen 0. This is the Anime Movie Podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have clips and we do video podcasts. And when we don't do video podcasts, we just do clips, and then you can see the whole podcast. Otherwise, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts if you hate looking at our faces. Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and give us a rating. Apparently, you can give ratings on Spotify now. Found that out the other day.
But you can put video podcasts on Spotify.
That's true. We might be doing that. We might be doing that soon. So yeah, big happening for the Anime Movie Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram. We post updates about things on there at the Anime Movie Podcast. You can write in to our email it's the Anime Movie Podcast @gmail.com.
And by the way, we love it when we see these like massive comments. Like sometimes we get these like couple of paragraphs from somebody, and some people are so kind where we're like, I don't understand how that happened. People are like, let me explain it, but not in these like really patronizing ways. So we love it. It's great to read. Thank you.
Yeah, except for some of our episodes. Some of them, I get bashed in a lot of our comments. Not a lot of hate coming your way. A lot of hate coming my way, which, warranted, I guess, sometimes. But
it's the burden of having a really cool personality.
It's the burden of having very strong opinions about Ash Ketchum's
instead of my like, well, I can't choose because I see the benefits of both things.
Yeah, then I'm like, Ash Ketchum fucking sucks. He's a terrible Pokemon trainer. And I get paragraphs from people about like, no, he's not. You're a terrible Pokemon trainer.
Oh God. Anyway.
But yeah, thanks for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode. I don't know what we're talking about, but
it's a surprise.
It'll be a good one. It'll be a surprise for all of us. Adios.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Anime Movie Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram at the Anime Movie Podcast, and you can reach out via email at the Anime Movie Podcast @gmail.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell a friend. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.